You know what hurts the most? It's not being rejected, it's realizing the person you care about never felt the same way to begin with. Not in the way you did, not in the way you hoped they did. And the worst part is, you didn't realize it right away. Because at first everything felt real. The conversations felt natural, the laughs felt genuine, the late night talks felt personal. There were moments where it seemed like something deeper was building between you. Little moments that made you believe this could actually turn into something. And when you start believing that, your heart slowly gets involved. Not all at once, but piece by piece. You start paying more attention to them. You notice the way their voice changes when they're excited. The way they talk about the things they care about. The way their mood shifts when something's bothering them. You start remembering small details about them without even trying. Things they mentioned once in passing. Their favorite music, their favorite food, the stories about their past, and without realizing it, they begin taking up more space in your mind. You think about them when something funny happens. You think about them when you hear a song they would like. You think about them when something reminds you of a conversation you once had. That's how feelings grow, quietly, naturally, without asking permission. But somewhere along the way, something starts to feel different, not wrong, just uneven. You notice that you're always the one starting conversations. You're the one asking questions, the one keeping things going, the one making the effort to stay connected. They still respond. They still talk to you. They still laugh and joke like everything is normal. But something about it feels lighter for them. Like they're enjoying the moment, but not investing in it the same way you are. And you try not to think too much about it because you don't want to ruin what you have. You tell yourself you're overthinking. You tell yourself they might just be busy or distracted or maybe just not good at expressing their feelings. So you keep showing up, you keep being patient, you keep being kind. Because part of you believes that if you're consistent enough, if you're supportive enough, if you care enough, maybe one day something will change. Maybe one day they'll look at you differently. Maybe one day they'll realize you were there all along. Maybe one day the feeling will finally grow on their side too. But deep down, there's a quiet fear you try not to face. A small voice that keeps asking the same question. What if they never feel the same way? And that thought is something your heart isn't ready to accept yet. Title: She Doesn't Feel the Same Way. Part 2. The hardest part isn't the moment you realize she doesn't feel the same way. It's everything that happens before that moment. The waiting, the hoping, the convincing yourself that maybe you just need to give it more time. Because feelings don't always grow instantly, right? Sometimes people just need space. Sometimes they need to see your consistency. Sometimes they need to realize what's right in front of them. At least that's what you keep telling yourself. So you keep showing up. You keep answering her messages. You keep making time for her even when your day is busy. You listen when she talks about her problems. You support her when she's stressed. You try to be the person she can always rely on. The person who understands her, the person who stays. And slowly, you start building this idea in your head. Not just about who she is, but about who the two of you could be together. You imagine simple things. Conversations that haven't happened yet. Moments that might happen someday. Little scenarios where everything finally clicks into place. And those thoughts feel good. They make the waiting feel worth it. They make the uncertainty easier to ignore. Because as long as there's still a possibility, you don't have to let go of the hope, but reality has a quiet way of revealing itself. Not all at once, not with some dramatic moment, just small things that slowly start adding up. Like the way she talks about someone else, not realizing how it lands when she says it, or how she mentions a guy she finds attractive, like it's just normal conversation, like it wouldn't affect you, or the way she disappears for hours, sometimes days, then comes back like nothing happened. And you're just happy she replied at all. Even if the message is short, even if the effort feels minimal, you start noticing the imbalance, but you don't want to believe it means something, because admitting the truth would mean facing a reality you've been avoiding, that maybe you care more than she ever will, that maybe you've been building something in your mind that she never intended to build with you. And the worst part is, she didn't lie to you. She didn't promise anything. She didn't say the words that would make you believe she felt the same way. You just filled in the silence yourself. You interpreted the kindness as something deeper, the attention as something meaningful. The connection is something mutual, but kindness isn't always love. Attention isn't always interest. And connection doesn't always mean someone sees you the way you see them. And slowly, the truth starts getting harder to ignore. Not because she suddenly tells you, but because her actions begin saying something your heart can't keep pretending not to hear. She doesn't feel the same way. And the longer you hold on to hope, the heavier that realization becomes. At some point, the truth stops whispering, and it starts becoming impossible to ignore. Not because she finally sits you down and says the words. Most of the time, that conversation never even happens. The truth shows up in quieter ways than that. It shows up in patterns, in effort, in the way someone chooses to show up in your life, or the way they don't. You start noticing things you used to overlook. How you're always the one starting the conversation. How if you stop texting first, the silence stretches longer than you expected. Hours, sometimes days, and eventually you break. You send the message anyway, because pretending you don't care feels harder than admitting that you do. You start noticing the energy difference too. How excited you are when she replies, and how normal it seems for her, like your presence in her life is something she can take or leave, not something she's worried about losing. That realization hurts in a very specific way, because you're not asking for everything. You're not asking for grand gestures or dramatic confessions. You're just asking for something simple, to feel chosen. But when someone truly wants you, you don't have to beg for that feeling. You don't have to analyze every message. You don't have to question whether you matter. It becomes obvious. And that's when the realization finally hits you. Not all at once, but slowly, like a weight settling on your chest. She doesn't feel the same way. Not in the way you hoped. Not in the way you needed. Maybe she likes you. Maybe she enjoys talking to you. Maybe she appreciates having you around. But there's a difference between appreciating someone and wanting to build something with them. And you start asking yourself questions you were too afraid to ask before. Was I just convenient? Was I just someone who was always there when she needed attention? Was I just filling space in her life while she waited for someone else? Those thoughts sting. But the deeper pain isn't even about her, it's about what you did to yourself while hoping things would change. How long you ignored your own feelings. How long you accepted less than you deserved. How long you told yourself to be patient, when patience wasn't the solution. Because love doesn't grow out of one person trying harder. Love doesn't appear just because you stayed long enough. Love isn't something you can earn by proving your loyalty and realizing that forces you to face a difficult truth. You can't make someone feel something they don't, no matter how good you are to them, no matter how much you care, no matter how much you wish it were different. And once that truth settles in, you're left with a choice, one that hurts either way. Keep holding on to someone who never chose you, or finally let go, even though part of you still wishes she would. Because the hardest thing about loving someone who doesn't feel the same way isn't losing them, it's accepting that you were never really theirs to begin with. At first, letting go doesn't feel like strength, it feels like defeat, like you're walking away from something that could have worked. If only things were slightly different. If only she saw you the way you saw her. If only she realized how much you cared. If only timing was better. If only you had said the right thing at the right moment. Your mind keeps replaying those what ifs over and over again, because your heart would rather believe in a small chance than accept a painful truth. But eventually something starts to shift inside you. Not dramatically, not overnight, just slowly. You start noticing how tired you are. Tired of hoping, tired of waiting, tired of checking your phone for a message that may or may not come, tired of feeling like your happiness depends on someone else's attention. And that's when a different kind of realization hits you, one that hurts, but also frees you. You didn't lose her because you never had her. What you lost was the version of her you created in your mind, the version that loved you back, the version that chose you, the version that saw your worth the same way you saw hers. But that version never actually existed. It was just hope, and hope can be beautiful, but when it's built on the wrong person, it slowly becomes something painful. You start seeing things more clearly, how much effort you gave, how much patience you showed, how much of yourself you poured into someone who never asked for it. And instead of feeling embarrassed about that, you begin to understand something important. There's nothing wrong with loving deeply. There's nothing wrong with caring. There's nothing wrong with believing in someone. The only mistake is giving all of that to someone who was never willing to meet you halfway. And the truth is, one day you're going to meet someone who does. Someone who doesn't make you question where you stand. Someone who doesn't make you guess how they feel. Someone who doesn't make you feel like loving them is a risk. Because when someone truly wants you, you won't have to convince them. You won't have to compete for their attention. You won't have to sit there wondering if you're enough. They'll show you clearly, consistently, without confusion. And when that happens, you'll look back at this version of yourself. The one who stayed too long, the one who hoped too hard, the one who loved someone who couldn't love him back. And instead of feeling regret, you'll feel something else. Gratitude. Because that experience didn't break you, it taught you. It taught you what love shouldn't feel like. And most importantly, it taught you that the right person will never leave you wondering why they don't feel the same way. Because when someone truly loves you, you'll never have to ask that question again. Why doesn't she love me? I met her on a Tuesday. Nothing special about the day, no rain, no music playing in the background, no movie moment, just a random Tuesday. She sat 2 seats in front of me in class, laughing with her friend about something I couldn't hear, but I remember thinking one thing. I want to know what makes her laugh like that. The first time we talked was stupid. I dropped my pen. She picked it up before I could. Here, she said, smiling. 3 seconds. That's how long the conversation lasted. But for some reason, I thought about it the rest of the day. Weeks passed. Eventually, we started talking more. At first, it was small things, homework, classes, teachers we both hated. Then it became normal. We'd sit next to each other, walk out of class together, send random messages late at night. And somewhere along the way, I started noticing things. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous. The way she laughed at her own jokes. The way she said my name. That's when it happened. I liked her. Everyone around me knew it before I admitted it. My friends would say things like, "Bro, you're down bad." I'd laugh it off. But they were right. Because suddenly everything I did started revolving around her. I'd check my phone hoping she texted. I'd replay conversations in my head. I'd think about what she meant when she said something, over and over again. One night we were texting. It was past midnight. The conversation slowed down until it turned into one of those deep talks people only have when they're tired. She told me about her fears, about how she overthinks everything, about how she's scared of getting hurt. And I remember staring at my screen thinking, how could anyone hurt someone like her? Then she sent a message. "Thanks for always being there." That sentence felt like winning the lottery. Months passed like that. Same routine, talking, laughing, late night conversations, but something was missing. Something obvious. She never flirted, never hinted, never gave me the signals everyone talks about, but she also never left. So I convinced myself it meant something. One day my friend asked me a question. "Have you told her you like her yet?" I laughed. "No." "Why not?" I didn't have an answer. The truth, I was scared, not of rejection, but of losing what we already had. Then one afternoon everything changed. We were sitting outside after class. The sun was going down. People were walking past us. She was telling me about some guy in her class. "Yeah, he's really nice." She said something about the way she said it felt different. I tried to play it cool. "Oh yeah?" She smiled. "I think he likes me." My chest tightened. "So, do you like him?" She paused, then she nodded. "Maybe." I remember smiling. I remember saying something like, "That's cool." I remember acting normal. But inside my head, one thought kept repeating. Why isn't it me? That night I stared at my phone. Her contact was at the top of my messages. All I had to do was type 3 words. "I like you." But my fingers wouldn't move, because suddenly I realized something. If I sent that message, everything could change. A week later, she told me they were going on a date. She seemed excited, happy, and I tried to be supportive. "Hope it goes well," I said. She smiled. "Thanks." That night I walked home alone. The same question kept replaying in my head, over and over again. Why doesn't she love me? I was there for her. I listened to her problems. I cared about her. So why him? It took me a long time to understand something. Love isn't a reward. It's not something you earn by being the nicest person. You can't calculate it like a math equation. Care plus time plus loyalty not equal to love. Sometimes people just don't feel the same way. Months later, we stopped talking as much. Not because we fought, just because life moves on. Different classes, different schedules, different people. But every once in a while, I still think about her laugh on that random Tuesday. And if you're watching this right now, maybe you're asking the same question I once did. Why doesn't she love me? And the answer might be something you don't want to hear. Sometimes there isn't a reason, but one day you'll meet someone who looks at you the way you once looked at her. And when that happens, you won't have to ask the question anymore, because the right person won't make you wonder. They'll make it obvious. You know what the worst part is? It's not the rejection. It's the almost. Because when someone rejects you clearly, it hurts, but at least it makes sense. They say no, you move on. But when someone almost loves you, that's a different type of pain, because you start replaying everything, every conversation, every laugh, every moment you thought meant something, and you start asking yourself questions that never have real answers. Did I say something wrong? Was I not good enough? Did I wait too long? After she started dating that guy, things between us didn't stop immediately. That's what made it worse. We still talked sometimes, still laughed, still had those random conversations that used to make my day. But something had changed, and we both knew it. There was this invisible line between us now. Before, it felt like we were walking towards something. Now it felt like we were standing still, and she was slowly walking away. One night she texted me again. Can I vent for a second? Of course she could. She always could. So I stayed up listening to her talk about problems with her boyfriend, how he didn't understand her, how he didn't listen the way I did, how he wasn't as patient as I was, and the entire time I just sat there thinking one thing. Then why aren't you with me? But I didn't say that. Instead I said the same thing I always said. I'm here for you. And she replied with the same message she always sent. You're such a good friend. That sentence. You're such a good friend. People say it like it's a compliment. But when you love someone, that sentence feels like a door closing, because suddenly you realize something. You weren't the guy she loved. You were the guy she felt safe with. The guy she vented to. The guy who listened. The guy who stayed. But safety doesn't always create attraction. And that realization messes with your head, because you start thinking, maybe I should have been different. Maybe I should have flirted more. Maybe I should have been less available. Maybe I should have acted like I didn't care. And that's when something dangerous starts happening. You begin to question the way you are as a person. You start thinking kindness is weakness. You start thinking loyalty is stupidity. You start thinking caring too much is the reason you got hurt. So slowly, you start changing. You stop texting first. You stop opening up. You stop showing people the parts of you that once cared deeply. Because somewhere in your mind, you're trying to protect yourself. I remember the exact moment I noticed that change. She sent me a message one afternoon. Something funny, a meme we both would have laughed at months earlier. I looked at it, and for the first time, I didn't feel anything. Not excitement, not happiness, just nothing. And that scared me more than the heartbreak ever did. Because heartbreak means you cared, but feeling nothing, that means something inside you shut down. That night I stared at the ceiling, thinking about everything that happened, and for the first time I asked a different question. Not, why doesn't she love me? But why did I give so much of myself to someone who never asked for it? That realization hits hard, because the truth is, she never promised me anything. She never said she loved me. She never said we were going to end up together. Those were expectations I built in my own head, and when those expectations broke, I blamed her. But deep down, I knew something. I wasn't just sad about losing her. I was sad about losing the version of me that believed things would work out. The version of me that believed if you cared enough, if you tried hard enough, if you stayed long enough, eventually someone would choose you. But life doesn't work like that. And realizing that changes you quietly, slowly, but permanently. But because after that, you start guarding your heart differently. Not because you want to, but because you remember exactly how it felt when someone almost loved you. And almost can mess someone up for a long time, And the craziest part, even after all that, there were still nights where I caught myself wondering the same thing, just staring at the ceiling, asking a question I already knew the answer to. Why doesn't she love me? You know what nobody tells you about heartbreak? It doesn't end the day you realize the truth. That moment where everything finally clicks, where you accept she isn't choosing you, where you tell yourself you're done thinking about her. That's not the ending. That's just the beginning of the quiet part. Because after that realization, life keeps moving, but your mind doesn't move as fast. You still catch yourself checking your phone sometimes, not because you expect a message, but because your brain spent so long hoping for one that the habit never fully disappears. You'll hear a song that reminds you of her, or pass a place you both used to talk about, or see something random that you know she would have laughed at, and for half a second, your mind goes straight to her, before you even realize it. It's strange how people can leave your life, but pieces of them stay behind in your routine, in your memories, in the way you think. At first you hate that. You want to forget everything. Every late night conversation, every inside joke, every moment you thought meant something, because remembering feels like reopening a wound that's trying to close. But memories don't disappear just because you want them to. They fade slowly, and that takes time. During that time, you start noticing something about yourself, something you didn't see when you were chasing her. You start realizing how much of your energy went into someone who never fully gave theirs back, how much time you spent thinking about what she wanted, what she needed, what she felt, while completely ignoring your own feelings. You start asking yourself questions you never asked before. Why was I okay with being second? Why was I always the one giving more? Why did I keep staying when the signs were obvious? And the honest answer isn't always pretty. Sometimes it's because you liked the idea of her more than the reality. Sometimes it's because you thought if you were patient enough, if you were good enough, eventually she'd realize what she had. But the hardest truth, sometimes people already know exactly what they have. They just don't want it the same way you do. That realization used to make me angry. Not at her, at myself. Because once you see the pattern, you start wondering how many times you ignored your own instincts. There were signs, of course there were. Moments where she pulled away, moments where her effort didn't match yours, moments where you felt confused instead of secure. But every time those moments appeared, you explained them away. You told yourself she was just busy, just stressed, just going through something. You gave her the benefit of the doubt so many times that eventually you stopped questioning anything at all. And that's when you lost control of the situation, not because she manipulated you, but because you convinced yourself that waiting was the same thing as building something. Eventually though, life forces you to move forward, even if your heart isn't completely ready. Weeks pass, then months. You start focusing on other things, work, friends, your own goals, the parts of your life that existed before she showed up. And slowly, you start feeling like yourself again. Not the exact same person, but a version of you that's a little quieter, a little more cautious, a little harder to read. One day you notice something strange. You go a whole day without thinking about her, then 2, then a week. And when you finally do remember her, the feeling isn't the same, the pain isn't sharp anymore. It's dull, distant, like a memory instead of a wound. That's when you realize something important. You didn't just lose her. You learned something from her. You learned what it feels like to give your heart fully. You learned what it feels like when that heart isn't returned. And most importantly, you learned what it feels like to survive that. Because at one point, and you thought that pain would break you, that it would stay forever, that you'd never stop asking the same question. But eventually, that question starts changing. It stops being, why doesn't she love me? And starts becoming something else. Something quieter, something more honest. Why did I believe someone who never chose me was meant for me? You know what's strange? For the longest time, the question stayed the same. Why doesn't she love me? It sat in the back of your mind like a locked door you couldn't open. You replayed every conversation, every moment, every small detail, trying to find the exact second where something went wrong. Maybe if you had said something different. Maybe if you had waited longer. Maybe if you had been more patient, more confident, more interesting, more enough. That's the dangerous part about unreturned love. It convinces you that the problem must be you. Because if the problem is you, then at least it means you could have fixed it. But the truth is something most people don't realize until much later. Love isn't a test you pass by trying harder. It's not a reward you earn by being patient. It's not something you convince someone to feel. Real love happens naturally. Two people choosing each other, not one person chasing while the other hesitates. Not one person waiting while the other decides. Choosing freely every day. And once you understand that, something inside you shifts. You stop looking back at the situation as a failure. You start seeing it as clarity. Because if someone doesn't love you, it doesn't mean you were unlovable. It just means you were loving the wrong person. That realization takes time to accept. At first, it almost feels unfair because you gave so much. Your time, your attention, your loyalty, your patience. And in the end, you didn't get the ending you hoped for, but something else happened instead. You changed. You became more aware, more protective of your energy. You started noticing the difference between interest and convenience, between effort and empty words, between someone who enjoys your attention and someone who genuinely values your presence. That kind of awareness doesn't come from easy love. It comes from heartbreak. And one day, without even realizing it, you stop thinking about her in the same way. You remember the story, but you don't feel trapped in it anymore. She becomes part of your past, not the center of your future. And when you think back to the question that once consumed you, why doesn't she love me? You finally understand something. It was never the right question. The real question was never about her feelings. It was about your worth. And the moment you stop measuring your value through someone else's love, that question disappears completely. Because the truth is simple. Someone out there will meet you, and they won't hesitate. They won't need time to figure it out. They won't treat you like an option. They'll see you, they'll choose you, and they'll make that choice obvious. When that day comes, you won't be asking why someone doesn't love you anymore. You'll finally understand that the right person never makes you question it in the first place. I think the hardest part about something ending is realizing it was already ending while you were still trying to save it. When I look back now, I can see it clearly. The small pauses, the delayed replies, the way their voice changed just slightly. Not enough to call it out, but enough to feel it. But back then, I called it stress. I called it timing. I called it, we're just going through a phase. Because admitting it wasn't meant to last would have meant admitting I was holding on to something already slipping through my hands. It didn't start badly. That's the thing. It started with intensity, with late night conversations that made sleep feel optional, with inside jokes that felt sacred, with that rush of feeling chosen, like out of everyone in the world, they saw me. And when you feel seen like that, you don't question it. You don't prepare for it to end. You just lean in. I leaned in fully. I memorized their patterns, their favorite songs, the way they said my name when they were tired. I built a version of the future in my head without even realizing it. Not a marriage and forever. Nothing dramatic, just consistency. Just comfort. Just them. Staying. But somewhere along the way, I started feeling like I was the only one building. They still talked to me, still laughed, still said the right things. But something was missing. Effort. And when effort slowly disappears, you start replacing it with your own. I texted first more often. I asked deeper questions. I reassured them when they seemed distant. I made excuses for their silence. They're just busy. They're going through something. It's not about you. And maybe it wasn't. But that didn't change the feeling. The subtle loneliness of being connected to someone who is already detaching. I felt it before I admitted it. That quiet instinct that whispers, this feels different now. But I ignored it because I didn't want to be dramatic. Because I didn't want to lose them. Because I thought love meant fighting harder when things got uncertain. What I didn't understand yet was that love isn't proven by how hard you fight alone. And sometimes something isn't falling apart because you didn't try enough. Sometimes it's falling apart because it was never meant to stay together. But I wasn't ready to accept that yet, so I stayed. And I tried and I hoped, even when deep down a quiet part of me already knew this wasn't going to last. The realization didn't hit all at once. It wasn't some dramatic fight. No screaming, no slam doors, no final speech about how we want different things. It was quieter than that. It was in the space between texts. The way replies became shorter. The way conversations that used to flow for hours started feeling forced after 5 minutes. I remember staring at my phone one night, reading the same dry message over and over, trying to find hidden meaning in it. Maybe they were tired, maybe they didn't mean it that way, maybe I was overthinking. I was always the one overthinking. But overthinking only happens when something feels off, and something felt off. They didn't ask about my day the way they used to. They didn't notice small changes anymore. They didn't look at me the same. And when someone stops noticing you, that's when it starts ending. I tried to compensate. I became lighter, easier, less needy. I stopped bringing up things that bothered me. I told myself not to ruin the vibe. I convinced myself that if I could just be a little more patient, a little more understanding, a little less emotional, maybe it would go back to how it was. But here's the truth I didn't want to face. When something is fading, you can't love it back to life. You can't effort your way into someone's certainty. You can't compete with someone's indifference, and I started to feel tired. Not of them, but of carrying it. Carrying the conversations, carrying the reassurance, carrying the hope. It felt like holding water in my hands. The tighter I tried to grip it, the faster it slipped through my fingers. There was one moment I'll never forget. We were together, physically in the same space, but emotionally it felt like there was an ocean between us. They were talking, smiling, present, but not with me. And that's when it hit. You can feel alone even when someone is sitting right next to you. That kind of loneliness is different. It's heavy, because it forces you to admit something. You're fighting for something the other person already let go of. I went home that night with a quiet ache in my chest. Not heartbreak, not yet, just clarity trying to break through denial. I lay in bed replaying everything. The beginning, the excitement, the promises that weren't promises but felt like them. And for the first time, I allowed the thought to fully form. Maybe this isn't temporary. Maybe this isn't a phase. Maybe this is the end, just stretched out slowly so it doesn't look like one. And that's when the question changed. It stopped being, how do I fix this? And started becoming, why am I trying to save something that doesn't want to stay? That's a painful question, because once you ask it, you can't unsee the answer. And the answer was simple. It wasn't that I wasn't enough. It wasn't that I didn't try hard enough. It wasn't that I failed. It was that this, whatever it was never meant to last. And deep down, I think we both knew it. I was just the only one still trying to pretend otherwise. Letting go didn't happen the day it ended. It happened in layers. First, I stopped arguing in my head. I stopped replaying conversations, trying to decode where it shifted. I stopped rewriting the past to make it feel fixable. Because once you see something clearly, you can't go back to pretending. I realized I wasn't actually scared of losing them. I was scared of losing the version of myself that believed this was finally it. The version of me that thought, maybe this time it'll stay. That's what I was grieving. Not just the person, but the hope. And hope is harder to bury than people. At first, I wanted answers, closure, a clean explanation I could hold in my hands. But the truth is, not everything ends with clarity. Some things fade because they were only meant to teach you something, not stay with you forever. And when I finally stopped fighting the ending, something strange happened. I felt lighter, still sad, still disappointed, but lighter. Because I wasn't dragging something behind me anymore. I wasn't trying to convince someone to see my value. I wasn't overextending myself to maintain something that was already collapsing. I started noticing how much of myself I had minimized to make it work. How often I swallowed words. How often I acted unbothered. How often I accepted less than I needed just to avoid losing them. And that realization hurt, because it meant I wasn't just losing them. I had been losing myself too. But here's the part that changed everything. I didn't hate them. I didn't turn cold. I didn't decide love was stupid. I didn't convince myself I'd never care again. I just understood. Some people come into your life not to stay, but to show you what you tolerate, to show you how deeply you can love, to show you where your boundaries should have been. And once the lesson is learned, the connection has no more purpose. That doesn't make it meaningless. It just makes it temporary. I stopped romanticizing what it could have been. I stopped imagining alternate endings. I stopped wishing they would wake up one day and suddenly become the version I needed. Because if someone has to transform completely to love you properly, they were never aligned with you to begin with. Letting go wasn't loud, it was quiet. It was choosing not to text, not to check their social media, not to ask mutual friends how they were doing. It was choosing peace over curiosity, and slowly I started feeling like myself again. The version of me that didn't revolve around someone else's attention. The version of me that felt steady without external reassurance. The version of me that understood if it was meant to last, it wouldn't have required me to shrink. And that's when the bitterness disappeared. Because I wasn't rejected. I was redirected. It wasn't taken from me. It was removed. And there's a difference. I used to think every ending meant failure. Like if something didn't last, it must not have been real. Or I must not have tried hard enough. Or maybe I just wasn't enough to make someone stay. But now I see it differently. Some things are real even if they're temporary. Some connections are intense because they were never designed for longevity. They burn bright. They feel significant. They teach you something and then they end. Not because you ruined them. Not because they were fake, but because they fulfilled their purpose. It was never meant to last. And that doesn't make it a waste. It made it a chapter. I stopped asking, why didn't it work? And started asking, what did it teach me? It taught me how quickly I attach when I feel understood. It taught me how deeply I love when I feel chosen. It taught me how easily I ignore my intuition when I'm afraid to lose someone. But it also taught me something else. I don't want half effort. I don't want uncertainty disguised as mystery. I don't want potential. I want consistency. I want something that doesn't require me to question it every night. Something that doesn't feel like I'm constantly auditioning for reassurance. Something that doesn't slowly drain me while I call it love. And if that means some things end early, good. Because I'd rather something end than stay in a space where it was quietly deteriorating. I no longer romanticize what we could have been. Because what we could have been would have required them to become someone else. And love shouldn't require transformation to feel secure. It should feel aligned. Now when I look back, I don't feel anger. I feel gratitude. Gratitude that it didn't drag on longer than it needed to. Gratitude that it showed me my patterns. Gratitude that it forced me to raise my standards instead of lowering them further. The ending wasn't a punishment, it was protection. And maybe the most powerful realization of all is this. If it was meant to last, it would have required effort from both sides. It would have felt steady. It would have grown naturally instead of being forced. Love that's meant for you doesn't make you anxious. It doesn't make you question your worth. It doesn't slowly fade while you're fighting to keep it alive. It stays. And if it doesn't stay, let it go. Because not everything that feels intense is meant to be permanent. Some people are lessons, some are mirrors, some are reminders, and some are simply experiences that prepare you for something deeper. It was never meant to last. And now, I'm finally okay with that. Not because it didn't matter, but because I matter more. No one chooses me. That's the thought that used to sit in my chest at night. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly enough to echo. No one chooses me. I didn't arrive at that conclusion all at once. It built itself slowly, through almost relationships, through I'm not ready, through watching someone I cared about choose somebody else, through being the dependable one, the understanding one, the one who never made things complicated, and still somehow never being the one they stayed for. I was always close to being official, close to being enough, close to being someone's first choice. But close doesn't count when you're the one left standing alone. I started noticing a pattern. I was the person people opened up to, the one they vented to about their ex, the one they said felt safe, the one they said was different. But when it came time to actually commit, they hesitated and eventually they chose someone else. It's hard not to internalize that. You start scanning yourself for flaws. Maybe I'm too quiet, maybe I'm too available. Maybe I care too much. Maybe I don't excite people the way chaos does. Maybe I'm the stable option, and stable isn't thrilling enough to win. You watch people chase unpredictability while you offer consistency. You watch them ignore loyalty while complaining about being hurt. And somewhere in that cycle, you start to wonder if being steady is invisible. No one chooses me. That thought followed me into new connections. I'd start hopeful, but guarded. I'd look for signs of withdrawal before they even happened. I'd brace for the moment the energy shifted, and the worst part, sometimes my fear of not being chosen made me act like I wasn't worth choosing. I'd overextend, overprove, overgive, as if effort could guarantee permanence. But here's what took me the longest to understand. Being chosen isn't about convincing someone. It's about alignment. I wasn't being overlooked because I lacked value. I was being bypassed because I was trying to fit into spaces that weren't built for me. Some people want excitement more than stability. Some people want attention more than depth. Some people say they want peace but choose chaos because it feels familiar. And that's not a reflection of my worth. It's a reflection of where they are emotionally. The real shift happened when I stopped asking, why don't they choose me? And started asking, why am I choosing people who hesitate about me? That question hurt because it meant taking accountability. It meant admitting that I was tolerating uncertainty just to avoid being alone. It meant recognizing that I was trying to earn spots in people's lives that should have been offered freely. And once I saw that clearly, something changed. I stopped auditioning. I stopped performing emotional gymnastics to keep someone interested. I stopped mistaking mixed signals for mystery. I stopped chasing people who needed convincing. And slowly the narrative shifted. No one chooses me became I don't settle for someone who doesn't. There's a quiet confidence that comes with that. Not arrogance, not bitterness, just clarity. Because the truth is, I don't need to be chosen by everyone. I need to be chosen by someone who sees what I bring without being persuaded. Someone who values steadiness. Someone who respects loyalty. Someone who understands that calm love isn't boring. It's secure. For a long time I thought being repeatedly left meant I was lacking something. Now I understand it means I haven't met someone aligned with me yet. And that's okay. Because I would rather wait than be temporarily selected. I would rather stand alone in my standards than shrink to fit into someone's uncertainty. No one chooses me. Not yet, but I choose myself. And the day someone steps into my life and matches that energy, it won't feel forced. It won't feel fragile. It won't feel like I'm barely holding on to their attention. It'll feel steady. And this time, I won't question it. The hardest part about believing no one chooses me isn't the loneliness. It's the comparison. Watching people around you fall into relationships so effortlessly. Watching them get the good morning texts, the public posts, the reassurance. Watching someone else be claimed confidently while you're still sitting with unanswered questions. You start wondering what they have that you don't. Are they more attractive, more outgoing, less intense, less emotional? You dissect yourself in ways you'd never dissect anyone else. And the dangerous thing about that mindset is it slowly lowers your standards. Because when you feel unchosen long enough, you start accepting partial effort as proof of progress. A late reply feels like hope. A half plan feels like commitment. A let's see where this goes feels like security. You tell yourself to be patient, to be understanding, to not ask for too much, but deep down you know. You know when someone is unsure about you. You feel it in the pauses, in the hesitation, in the way their effort fluctuates. And still, you stay, because being almost chosen feels safer than being alone again. That's a cycle I had to break. I had to sit with the discomfort of walking away first. I had to choose silence instead of chasing clarity. I had to let people lose access to me without sending one last paragraph trying to explain my worth. That was new for me. But something powerful happens when you stop begging to be selected. You start carrying yourself differently. You don't rush emotional intimacy. You don't overshare to fast-track connection. You don't build futures in your head off 2 weeks of consistency. You observe. You pace yourself. You protect your energy. And for the first time, it doesn't feel like no one is choosing you. It feels like you're being selective. There's a big difference. Because the right person won't need convincing. They won't treat commitment like a gamble. They won't make you feel like you're in competition for basic reassurance. They'll step forward confidently. And when that happens, you won't feel anxious. You won't feel like you're waiting for the shift. You'll feel calm. And calm is something I never associated with love before. But now I do. There was a night I remember clearly. Nothing dramatic had happened. No breakup text, no argument. Just another slow fade from someone who once seemed sure about me. And I sat there thinking, maybe this is just who I am. The backup plan. The emotional support character in everyone else's love story. That thought hurt more than any rejection ever did, because it wasn't about them anymore. It was about how I saw myself. I realized I had quietly built an identity around being the one people leave. So I expected it, braced for it, sometimes even tolerated behavior that confirmed it. And here's the uncomfortable truth. When you believe you're not the one people choose, you subconsciously accept crumbs just to prove you're wrong. You ignore inconsistencies. You rationalize disrespect. You minimize your own needs, all because you're scared that asking for more will push them away. But the real shift happened when I asked myself something different. What if the problem isn't that no one chooses me? What if it's that I keep trying to be chosen by people who are incapable of choosing anyone properly? That question changed everything, because suddenly it wasn't about my worth. It was about compatibility, emotional maturity, timing. I started noticing something I'd ignored before. The people I was drawn to were often uncertain in general, not just about me, about life, about commitment, about themselves. And I was trying to build something stable with people who were still figuring out how to stand still. Of course, it kept collapsing, not because I was unworthy, but because I was planting myself in temporary soil. So I did something different. I stopped chasing potential, stopped falling for words without consistent action, stopped trying to prove I was worth keeping. Instead, I started asking myself, do I even feel chosen here? Not in the beginning excitement, not in the sweet talk, but in the consistency. And if the answer was no, I didn't fight for it. I let it go. And for the first time, walking away didn't feel like rejection. It felt like self-respect. I used to think the sentence, "no one chooses me," was a life sentence. Now I see it was a phase, a painful one, a humbling one, but a necessary one. Because somewhere along the way, I confused being wanted with being valued. I confused attention with intention. I confused temporary excitement with long-term alignment. And every time someone left, I made it mean something about me. Now I know better. Being chosen isn't about being the loudest, the flashiest, or the most convenient. It's about being aligned with someone who recognizes depth when they see it. Someone who isn't intimidated by consistency. Someone who doesn't treat commitment like a trap. I stopped focusing on who wasn't picking me and started focusing on who I was becoming. Stronger, more self-aware, less afraid of standing alone. Because here's the truth that finally set me free. If someone has to debate whether they want you, they don't. And that's okay. Rejection isn't proof that you're lacking. It's proof that not everyone is meant to build with you. One day, someone will step into my life and there won't be hesitation. No mixed signals. No energy shifts. No quiet distancing. Just clarity. And when that happens, I won't feel surprised. I won't feel lucky. I won't feel like I finally won. I'll feel ready. Because the seasons where no one chose me taught me how to choose myself. And once you truly do that, once you stop shrinking, stop chasing, stop auditioning for love, you don't feel unselected anymore. You feel selective. No one chooses me, not anymore. Now it's mutual. You think you know someone. You trust them with pieces of yourself you don't show anyone else. You listen when they talk. You notice the little things. You hold space for them in ways that aren't flashy but are meaningful. And in return, silence, dry replies, absence where warmth used to be. It starts subtly. They check in less. They don't ask how your day was. And at first you tell yourself it's nothing. Maybe they're busy. Maybe they're tired. Maybe it's just a moment. But your chest tightens in ways words can't explain. You notice every shift, every pause, every small distance they put between you and them. And then comes the heartbreak, the slow, quiet heartbreak of realizing you've been loving someone who doesn't love you the same way. Not because they're cruel, not because they meant to hurt you, but because they didn't notice. They didn't see how much of yourself you poured into them. They didn't recognize that when they pulled back, your world shifted. You replay everything, every conversation, every message, every time you tried to be enough. And the truth sinks in. Being enough wasn't the point. They weren't prepared to meet you where you were. They liked the idea of you, the comfort of your loyalty, the consistency of your care, but the real you, the one who loves deeply, quietly, fiercely, that one didn't fit the story they were willing to write. You start shrinking, not in a malicious way, but instinctively. You over-explain. You double text. You become smaller so your presence isn't overwhelming. You hope somewhere that if you offer enough, if you try hard enough, they'll choose you. but the choice was never yours to make. And it hurts, so much more than any fight or betrayal, because it's not a sudden break. It's a slow erosion. You're left holding all the fragments of the connection that felt like home, while they move on unaware of the weight they left behind. But heartbreak like this teaches something. It teaches that caring too much doesn't make you weak. It teaches that loving quietly doesn't make your love invisible. It just means it's rare. It teaches that attachment isn't shameful, it's human. And most importantly, it teaches that your heart has limits, and that some people aren't meant to stay. They're meant to show you what real love feels like when it's not returned. So you mourn, you grieve, you feel the hollow ache of being someone's constant when you weren't theirs. But slowly you reclaim your space. You remind yourself that your loyalty is precious, that your quiet love is a strength, that the way you give yourself to people is beautiful, and one day it will be met by someone who sees it, who doesn't take it for granted, who won't leave without realizing the weight of what they lost. Until then, you carry on. You hold your heart with care. You give to those who reciprocate, and you protect the parts of yourself that matter most. And maybe that's the hardest heartbreak of all. Learning that sometimes love isn't enough, but yourself finally is, after the heartbreak and the world feels quieter. Not the calm kind of quiet, but the heavy kind that presses against your chest when you try to breathe. You notice the little things now, the empty space where their laughter used to live, the messages that no longer come, the absence of someone who once made every day feel brighter. You start replaying memories not because you want to, but because your brain refuses to let them go. You think about all the mornings you stayed up texting, all the nights you sat listening while they poured out their life, all the times you tried to show them love in ways they didn't see. And you realize the cruel truth. Your care was never enough, not because it lacked depth, but because it was given to someone who wasn't ready, someone who didn't notice what they had. You try to fill the emptiness. You text friends more, throw yourself into work, binge shows, do anything to keep your mind busy. But the quiet moments come back, relentless. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, you feel the weight of every second you were devoted to someone who didn't stay. You feel the ache of giving your heart fully and not having it returned the same way. It's tempting to blame yourself. Maybe if you were funnier, if you were louder, if you were more outgoing, they would have stayed. Maybe your quiet way of loving wasn't enough for them. But deep down, you know that's not the truth. The problem wasn't you, it was that they never truly met you where you were. Never learned to see the depth beneath the calm exterior. And slowly, painfully, you begin to understand. Heartbreak like this doesn't just hurt, it teaches. It shows you who sees you, who notices your effort, who can match your quiet loyalty with real care. It teaches that your love, steady and deep, isn't a flaw, it's rare. And it teaches that some people aren't meant to stay, no matter how much you give, because their hearts aren't ready to hold yours. You're left with pieces of a love that was never fully yours. And in picking them up, you start to rebuild, not for them, not for anyone, but for yourself. You remind yourself that your heart is valuable, that your quiet love is a strength, and that someday someone will meet it fully without taking it for granted. The days start to blur, but something begins to shift. You notice it in the small moments, when you wake up without checking your phone for a message that won't come, when you go out and enjoy your own company without thinking of them, when you smile at a memory without the sting of longing. It's subtle, almost imperceptible, but it's there. A tiny spark that reminds you who you are outside of them. You begin to recognize patterns in yourself. The way you gave too much too fast. The way you depended on their energy for your own happiness. The way your loyalty was extended even when it wasn't asked for. And instead of blaming yourself, you start learning from it. You see your quiet love not as a weakness, but as a rare gift. A depth most people won't understand, but that the right person will cherish. It's not easy. Nights still come where the silence is deafening, where the ache feels unbearable. You catch yourself imagining them, wondering if they think of you the way you think of them. You remind yourself to breathe, to stay present, to not let the what-ifs control you. Slowly, the focus turns inward. You start filling your time with things that matter to you. Small joys, long walks, music that resonates, books that speak to your soul. You reconnect with yourself in ways you didn't know you could. Your heart, once so exposed, now holds boundaries. You learn that love isn't about giving endlessly to someone who doesn't see it. It's about recognizing your own value, respecting your own heart, and being patient for someone who can meet you where you are. And in that patience, there's power. The heartbreak that once felt like it would consume you becomes a teacher. You remember that caring deeply is not a flaw, that needing quiet, needing steadiness, needing someone who can match your love and depth is not too much. And slowly the sting of loss softens into clarity. The right person will not drain your heart, will not take your loyalty for granted, will not expect you to perform to earn their attention. You begin to hope again, not desperately, not with attachment, but with a quiet confidence that what's meant for you will recognize your depth. That heartbreak, as painful as it was also a filter. And now finally, you can see clearly who belongs in your life and who is never ready to stay. And then comes a day when you finally feel it. The weight lifting, the chest ache softening, the constant replay of their absence no longer controlling your mind. You realize you've carried yourself through storms you didn't think you could survive. Every sleepless night, every overthought message, every longing glance, it all shaped you, but it didn't break you. You start to live in the spaces you once reserved for them. Mornings feel lighter, music doesn't sting as much, you laugh without the shadow of expectation. You don't need someone to validate your worth anymore, because you see it yourself. Your love once poured into someone who didn't ask for it is now held carefully, intentionally, reserved for those who will see it as the treasure it is. You remember the quiet heartbreaks, the moments you overextended, the nights you felt invisible, and you forgive yourself. You forgive yourself for caring too much, for hoping too hard, for offering loyalty to someone who didn't know what to do with it. You understand now, loving deeply is not a flaw, it's a strength, but it needs protection. And with that understanding comes freedom. You start to notice the difference between attention and intention, consistency and obligation, presence and performance. You stop chasing people who can't meet you, who can't match your depth. You stop shrinking to fit into someone else's expectations. You stop fearing silence and start valuing your own voice. The heart that once ached so fiercely is still soft, still capable, still full, but it is yours again. You've reclaimed it piece by piece, boundary by boundary, moment by moment. And in doing so, you find peace in the knowledge that the right person won't make you small. The right person won't demand more than you can give. They'll cherish it all. You're ready now, not desperate, not waiting, not attached to what was lost, but open to connection that feels safe, real, and mutual. Open to love that doesn't consume you but uplifts you. And most importantly, open to yourself, finally at home within your own heart, finally whole again. You used to be my best friend, the person I would choose over everyone else. What changed? I've asked myself that question more times than I'll ever admit, not out loud, just in the quiet moments, when something reminds me of you without permission, when I hear a joke you would have laughed at, when I instinctively reach for my phone before remembering there's no point anymore. You used to be the first person I told everything to, not because I had to, but because I wanted to, because somehow your opinion mattered more than anyone else's. Your voice carried weight, your presence carried peace, and I didn't even realize how rare that was while I had it. I just thought you'd always be there. We didn't become close all at once. It happened slowly. One conversation that lasted longer than expected. One moment of honesty neither of us planned. One night where neither of us wanted to say goodbye first. And suddenly you weren't just someone I talked to. You were my person. The one I told things I didn't tell anyone else. The one who saw parts of me I kept hidden from the world. You knew when I wasn't okay without me saying it. You'd ask, talk to me, what's wrong? And I would. Because with you, I didn't have to pretend. I didn't have to be the strong version of myself. I could just exist. And that was enough for you. There's something dangerous about that kind of connection, because you don't prepare for it to end. You don't think about life without it. It becomes part of you, part of your routine, part of your identity. You stop imagining endings because some part of you believes this is permanent, that this is different, that this is safe. I don't know when things started changing. That's the worst part. There wasn't a moment. There wasn't a fight. There wasn't a clear ending. Just distance. Quiet, gradual distance. Your replies got shorter. Your energy shifted. You stopped asking how I was. Stopped noticing the things you used to notice instantly. I remember staring at our messages, rereading them, wondering if I did something wrong, wondering if there was a version of me you got tired of, or if you just found someone who made you forget about me entirely. And I hated myself for even thinking that, because I trusted you, I trusted us. And y'all, I tried to ignore it at first, told myself you were busy, tired, going through something. I gave you space even when it hurt, because I didn't want to be someone you felt obligated to respond to. I didn't want to be the person you sighed at before replying, so I became quieter, smaller, less present, not because I cared less, but because I cared too much to push you away completely. And the craziest part is, even while you were slowly leaving, you still meant everything to me. I still chose you, even when it stopped feeling like you were choosing me. I still defended you in my head, still made excuses for your absence, still held on to the version of you that used to stay, because I didn't want to accept that maybe that version of you didn't exist anymore. The hardest thing I've ever had to accept is that you didn't leave all at once. You left in pieces, in delayed replies, in canceled plans, and conversations that felt forced instead of effortless. Until one day you weren't my best friend anymore. You were just someone I used to know everything about. And that's a different kind of pain, because you're not grieving a person who disappeared. You're grieving a person who's still alive, just no longer yours. Sometimes I wonder if you ever think about me, if something ever reminds you of how close we were, if you ever miss me the way I miss you, or if I became easy to forget, easy to replace, easy to move on from. Because I'll be honest, you weren't easy to lose, you weren't easy to replace. You weren't easy to forget. You were home, and losing you didn't just break my heart. It broke the part of me that believed some people stay forever. You used to be my best friend, and I still don't know what changed. I just know that one day, you stopped choosing me. And I never stopped choosing you. I think the part that hurt the most wasn't the day you left, it was all the days after. The days where something happened and you weren't the first person I told anymore. The days where I'd pick up my phone out of instinct, already knowing there wouldn't be a message from you. The days where I had to teach myself not to look for you in places you used to be. Because when someone becomes part of your everyday life, losing them doesn't feel like a single moment. It feels like 1,000 small losses, over and over again. I remember the exact feeling of realizing I couldn't come to you anymore. Not because I didn't want to, but because you weren't there in the same way. Your responses felt distant, polite, like you were talking to someone you used to know, not someone you once couldn't go a day without. And I tried to act like it didn't affect me, tried to match your energy, tried to pretend I didn't notice the difference. But I noticed everything. I noticed how you stopped asking questions, how conversations died faster, how I became the only one trying to keep them alive. And there's nothing more humiliating than feeling yourself become optional to someone who once made you feel essential. I started questioning everything. Was any of it real? Did you ever care the way I cared, or was I just there when it was convenient? When you were bored, when you needed someone to listen? Because when you stopped needing me, you stopped choosing me, and that realization changes you. It makes you quieter, more careful, more guarded. Not because you want to be, but because you don't ever want to feel that disposable again. There were nights I sat there staring at our old messages, reading conversations from a version of us that doesn't exist anymore. And I'd wonder how two people could go from talking every single day to nothing. No closure, no explanation, just silence. Like everything we were meant less than I thought it did. And silence is the worst answer of all, because it forces you to create your own conclusions, most of which hurt more than the truth probably would have. I never told you how much it broke me, how losing you didn't just hurt, it changed me. It changed how I trust people, how I open up, how I let people get close. Because you taught me that even the person who knows you best can still become a stranger, and that's a terrifying thing to learn. The truth is, I wasn't just losing you. I was losing the version of myself that existed when you were in my life. The version of me that felt understood, chosen, safe, and I've spent a long time trying to find him again. But some parts of you don't come back the same after someone you trusted walks away without warning. Some parts of you stay behind with them, and you just learn to live with what's left. The hardest part is you didn't disappear all at once. You faded slowly, so slowly I didn't even realize it was happening until you were already gone. At first it was small things. You stopped telling me about your day, stopped sharing the random thoughts you used to trust me with, stopped needing me the way you used to, and I told myself it was nothing. People get busy, people change. That's normal, right? But deep down, there was this quiet voice in my head that already knew the truth. I was losing you, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I tried to hold on. I tried to be easier to love, quieter, less emotional, less needy. I stopped bringing up things that bothered me, stopped asking questions I was afraid of hearing the answers to. I made myself smaller, just so you'd have more space to stay. But the sad part is, you don't lose people because you took up too much space. You lose them because they were already leaving, and I was the only one pretending we were still the same. I remember the moment it really hit me. It wasn't during a fight. It wasn't during some dramatic ending. It was during a normal, ordinary moment. Something happened, and for the first time, you weren't the person I wanted to tell. Not because I didn't care about you, but because something inside me knew you didn't care the same anymore. And that realization didn't feel loud. It felt quiet, heavy, final, like watching the last light in a room turn off. You became someone I used to know, someone I had memories with but no future with. And that's a different kind of pain, because you're still alive, still out there, still existing in the same world as me, but I can't reach you anymore, not in the way that mattered. Sometimes I still think about you, not in the way I used to, not with hope, just with this strange sense of disbelief, like I can't fully process how someone who meant everything became nothing, how we went from being inseparable to strangers with history. And the worst part is, I don't even think you realize what you did to me, because for you it was probably just moving on. But for me, it was losing the one person I never thought I'd have to live without. And the truth is, I blamed myself for a long time. I kept replaying everything in my head like there was some exact moment where I ruined it. Some sentence I shouldn't have said. Some version of me that wasn't enough. I convinced myself that if I had just been better, you would have stayed. If I was more confident, more interesting, less emotional, less me, maybe you wouldn't have left. But the hardest thing I've had to accept is this. You didn't leave because I was too much. You left because I wasn't enough for you. And those are two very different things. I think what hurts the most isn't that you're gone. It's that you stayed long enough to become part of me. You became my routine. My first thought when something good happened. My first instinct when something went wrong. You weren't just someone I loved. You were home. And when you left, you didn't just take yourself. You took the version of me that existed with you. The version that felt safe. The version that wasn't constantly afraid of being abandoned. People think heartbreak is loud, crying, begging, breaking down. But the real heartbreak is quiet. It's checking your phone and realizing there's nothing there. It's seeing something that reminds you of them and having no one to send it to. It's missing someone who's still alive. It's waking up and remembering over and over again that they chose a life without you in it. I don't hate you, and I don't think I ever will. Because even though you broke me, you also showed me how deeply I'm capable of loving. You showed me the parts of myself that were real, the parts that cared without conditions, the parts that stayed even when you didn't. And maybe one day, you'll just be a memory that doesn't hurt anymore. Maybe one day I'll hear your name and feel nothing. Maybe one day I'll stop wondering why I wasn't enough. But until then, there's a version of me that still exists in the past, still standing there, still believing you were the one person who wouldn't leave, still not understanding how my best friend became someone I had to learn how to live without.